Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Amanda Vinicky. Paris Schutz has the evening off. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. A Food and Drug Administration panel says COVID-19 booster shots are not needed for everyone, but the FDA panel did unanimously vote to recommend a booster shot for those aged 65 and older, as well as individuals with health concerns that put them at higher risk. More later on this in just a few moments with our Week in Review panel. Meanwhile, Governor J.B. Pritzker this afternoon extended COVID-related executive orders. Masks are required in indoor public settings statewide through October 16th. The latest executive action pushes back the deadline when state employees and contractors who work at state-run veterans' homes and prisons must be vaccinated against COVID. And Illinois has seen almost 26,000 new cases of the coronavirus this past week. Some 2,000 COVID patients are on ventilators. And state health officials report there's no more hospital space for patients who require intensive care in southern Illinois. The most recent Illinois Public Health Department data shows some 500 open ICU beds statewide. Unvaccinated individuals do account for nearly every serious case of COVID. According to state public health data, 142,000 vaccine doses were given this week. Nearly 63% of Illinois adults are now fully vaccinated. Congress has awarded 175 congressional gold medals throughout history. As WTTW News First reported, Congressman Bobby Rush wants Congress to give out more. He's sponsor of an act that would award the scientists behind the life-saving COVID vaccine, as well as vaccine trial volunteers and others around the world responsible for the vaccine's development. More on this story on our website. Domestic workers in Chicago will have the right to a written contract starting January.
Today we celebrate a milestone in improving the working condition and increasing recognition of the profession of nannies, caregivers, cleaners in Chicago.
A city ordinance that takes effect at the start of the new year fines employers $500 if they refuse to sign a contract with maids, nannies, or home care workers. Arise Chicago is starting an outreach program this weekend, helping to educate workers and helping them draft legal agreements. Chicago residents of Mexican heritage are celebrating Mexican Independence Day, and that means a lot of honking, flag waving, and, alas, traffic. The city's police and emergency management agencies warn drivers to expect rolling closures of DuSable Lakeshore Drive, Roosevelt Road, Michigan Avenue, Ida B. Wells Drive, and Columbus Drive tonight and through the rest of the weekend. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Mila Kompalova of Chalkbeat Chicago, Heidi Quigg of Cranes Chicago Business, Taman Bradley of WGN-TV, and Dan Mihalopoulos of WBEZ. And let's get right to it. A key advisory committee for the Food and Drug Administration voting against recommending a Pfizer COVID booster shot to people 16 and over, but endorsing boosters to those 65 years old and up, also to those at high risk for serious cases of COVID. Let's listen to a clip from the Deputy Director of the FDA's Office of Vaccines Research and Review.
One of the issues in this is that much of the data that's been presented and is being discussed today is not peer-reviewed and has not been reviewed by FDA.
So I would like to go to you first, AD. The president had talked about starting to give booster shots to everybody starting September 20th. And by the way, that is Monday. So why did this committee not approve that?
Basically, it was about the efficacy of the vaccines for folks that weren't at low risk or weren't old. And there's some dueling data that the United States has, that Israel has. And you know, this could vary a lot depending on what the administration considers high-risk individuals. I think we're going to have to wait and see what the data says about the efficacy of the vaccine for younger folks as to whether we'll have boosters. And then kind of playing in the background of all of this is the ethics of the United States using more booster shots when so much of the world does not have a vaccine supply, and that the virus could be mutating around the world in places where folks aren't getting vaccinated. So we'll have to wait and see in the next couple months what the data says, and then we'll also have to see where the rest of the world is.
Now, Mila, how big of a setback could this be for the Biden administration? Again, he was a big booster of these booster shots is part of his program to try and calm down this surge in cases.
Yes, exactly. And obviously, ever since coming in, the Biden administration has made a big case for following the science and has tried to build trust around reliance on science and using science as really what's helping drive policies here. And here we have a case where it looked like the plans for the booster shots later in September got ahead of the science. So that's a setback right there. And
Taman, you're a political reporter. What are the politics of this for President Biden when he's supposed to be, again, the science-driven president?
Well, I would imagine, Amanda, that the White House is very frustrated about this decision because certainly they would like to turn the corner. They would like to make sure that the economy is thriving. And we've seen with some school districts having to send kids home, some people reverting back to remote learning. That's something that the president doesn't want to see. In terms of restaurants, businesses being open, us gathering in public venues, that is something that the president would like to see ahead of next year and the midterm elections. You know, it was part of his strategy to encourage us all to go out and get vaccinated. And so there's just a lot that we don't know. If, in fact, the vaccines wear off in 6 to 8 months, some people will begin to enter that phase, that period of 6 to 8 months this fall. So we don't know if, in fact, more people will get sick. And so it's got to be very frustrating that when you did have Pfizer saying that, in fact, if you got the booster shot, it could protect you even more than the second shot initially did. But we just don't have enough information at this point. So it's the unknown politically that I think is keeping the White House up at night.
And perhaps more confusion, which I think has been an issue throughout the pandemic. Dan, I want to bring you in because another part of the president's platform is requiring vaccines. He wants it for all places of work with over 100 employees. Also, federal employees, by the way, who don't have the ability to get tested. That is something, however, that Governor J.B. Pritzker is pushing, even though now he has delayed instituting that requirement for state employees and contractors in settings like prisons, veterans' homes, congregate settings. Mayor Lori Lightfoot as well has some requirements. Weigh in on this. Are people going to have the appetite to get the vaccine amidst this confusion at the federal level?
So it's no secret that the number of people getting vaccinated has stalled, and so the people that have the appetite went there immediately. I remember I went in as soon as I could. I didn't jump the line, but I went as soon as I could, and we're coming up on 6 months from the first shots that journalists could take as a subcategory of frontline workers after the other real frontline workers. And so those of us who wanted to are going, and you're going to have a big subset no matter where you are in this country. You're going to have a big subset of people that don't want to be forced, as they put it, to do this. And that includes public employees. Absolutely. We've seen a lot of pushback from the Fraternal Order of Police to the point that he used some frankly offensive and ridiculous comparisons, the head of the FOP a couple of weeks ago, to vaccine mandates. But yeah, it's absolutely an issue because we're very far from 100% of people having the appetite, as you put it.
Yeah, I think that 63% of Illinois adults now, but that's really hasn't notched up by much. It was 61% last week. Now let's go to politics this week. Mayor Lori Lightfoot names the next CEO of Chicago Public Schools. The Chicago Park District's Inspector General, who was leading the investigation into allegations of sexual abuse, resigns. And Cook County State's Attorney opens an investigation into the Park District's handling of that probe. Also, Alderman Jim Gardner faces a federal probe into bribery and pay-to-play allegations. So, San Antonio Schools Chief Pedro Martinez going to be the next CEO for CPS. Here's a clip from Martinez on his priorities.
This is the time for us to come together. We have to be united. We cannot be fighting within ourselves. The enemy is COVID. The enemy is the systemic racism we've had in our country. The enemy is poverty. There are many enemies. We are on the same side.
He is going to be coming in facing a whole lot of, if not enemies, at least AD challenges. We've got a new elected school board, rebuilding district leadership after a monster brain drain at the top of CPS. Will he be able to do it, AD?
That's always a question for these new CEOs, right? And we've had 7 of them in the last decade or so. Mila can correct me on that, but it's been a time of a ton of change at CPS, and they've seen declining enrollment. They have a lot of under-enrolled schools, this unresolved workplace standards with the Chicago Teachers Union, a delay in rolling out COVID testing, a lot of parents who are still demanding an option for remote instruction, charter interest. We've got charter schools that are unionizing, budget problems. Once we get past this huge raft of federal relief, it's a lot to handle, not to mention the size of CPS compared to San Antonio and the politics of Chicago in general. It would be a challenge for anyone coming in, and it's an advantage that he's from here, but he also hasn't been here in a while. So he's got a lot to get under control. And like you mentioned, having folks in leadership, he's going to have to recruit pretty hard. I think there are half a dozen vacancies at the top of CPS leadership, and that's not a small task to fill. And anyone coming in also has to recognize that they have all these problems to deal with and that nothing's going to get handed to them. But at least for now, I think having that federal relief there will help, but COVID is definitely the number one thing facing him as he comes in.
We'll get back to that in just a second. But Mila, you are our education expert. What do we know about Martinez's time leading schools in San Antonio? There was some controversial issues with charter schools.
That's right. Pedro Martinez has led the San Antonio School District since 2015, and one of the developments during his tenure that has been somewhat controversial is an expansion in charter schools and the moves that he made earlier on in his tenure to hand over control to district-run schools to charter and other private operators. Now, he said during the press conference earlier this week announcing his appointment that a law that had gone into effect in Texas right before he took over that district left him and his school board at the time relatively few options because schools that were flagged as underperforming by the state faced closure unless the district found somebody from outside, a more independent entity to take over. I chatted a little bit about this with Alejandra Lopez, the head of the teachers union there. She, to some extent, acknowledged that the district was in a tough spot, but she felt that the district did have some options, including partnering with higher education institutions and nonprofits, and that Pedro Martinez did not have much dialogue with folks in school communities before making some of those decisions. He has also gotten some credit for improvements in that district's graduation rate, for an innovative effort to increase racial integration of that district, and just improving the district's standing in Texas's rating system for districts. And he made some news just recently by defying the ban against vaccination and mask mandates that the Texas governor instituted. And
so certainly a very different sort of scenario than he has in Chicago, where that decision is effectively made. Masks are mandatory. Now, Taman, though, what about that relationship with unions? There has been a very tense one with previous school chiefs, with CTU. Martinez coming in, it seems like, with some of that. Do you expect that he's going to be able to bridge those divisions?
So he certainly got a warm Chicago welcome from the Chicago Teachers Union, reminding everybody that he worked as financial advisor to Arne Duncan when he was the CEO of Chicago Public Schools. Like Mila, I also talked to the head of the Teachers Union down in San Antonio, who said that Pedro Martinez is not only anti-union, he's anti-worker. So he obviously butted heads down there over the issue of charters. They also said that he was not inclusive. He was not someone who would listen. And so, he's going to immediately be in the middle of the storm here, where the Chicago Teachers Union continues to battle over COVID safety protocols in schools now that the schools are reopened and we don't have an agreement. And I also went to that news conference and asked him sort of to just give us a sense of short-term and long-term, what needs to happen for the district, what are the challenges it faces, and he was focused only on COVID. He said it's very important to keep the schools open, and that is the immediate concern, and he'll have more to say about the bigger issues down the road. And so it makes you wonder, Mayor Lightfoot obviously knew that he had some challenges with the union down there. Maybe she wants someone that can be more out front. Janice Jackson was not often the face of the person taking on the union. That was more reserved to both Mayors Lightfoot and Emanuel. So perhaps she wants the CEO to be a little bit more aggressive in taking on the CTU. Remains to be determined, but as you played in that clip, he says that the enemy is COVID. It's not the teachers and the administration.
We'll see. By warm welcome, you meant icy, at least air conditioning versus the weather outside there.
That's how we do things here in Chicago.
Yeah. Now, Dan, we're going to move on to a story that you've been covering, and that is the Chicago Park District and allegations of sexual assault, even violence by lifeguards. And this week, you had the Inspector General overseeing that probe resigning when it came to light that she herself had been subject of an investigation. So, Dan, what can you share with us where this stands and what that resignation may mean for getting to the heart of what's going on at the Park District?
Yeah, there were a couple really dramatic developments in this investigation that has gone on for a year and a half now, and it went on in secret for more than a year until we first reported on it in April. Dozens of employees allegedly routinely engaging in sexual harassment, sexual abuse, sexual assault, often supervisors against lifeguards who are very young women or even teenage girls as young as 16. So obviously a very serious issue that has been allowed to fester, an investigation that dragged on. For weeks, Mayor Lori Lightfoot has completely defended the Inspector General of the Park District and said, let's give her space, let's wait until she finishes. This week, hours after we published a story about another investigation that targeted this Inspector General in a previous job at the Cook County Juvenile Jail, total about face from Mayor Lightfoot. She, the Inspector General resigned and the mayor either forced it or really approved of this quick decision and changed her tune completely. And so now you have essentially a headless investigation. But the second big development of the week was we learned that for a month now, nearly, State's Attorney Kim Foxx and her office has been looking at not only these alleged sex crimes, but also other alleged other alleged criminal activity, such as obstruction of justice and witness tampering. So they're really doing an investigation from the law enforcement angle of the handling of the case by the Park District.
And that's the one to really perhaps truly keep an eye on, because of course criminal investigation is just that. Briefly, Dan, you said that the mayor had a bit of an about face. Do you believe, did Lightfoot know about the previous investigation into the watchdog, or was this news to her?
Well, the investigation by the Park District watchdog has been known publicly since April, and she defended that investigation, and she said that this was an investigation.
Right. No, I'm sorry. The investigation into Elaine Little was the Inspector General. Was it news to Lightfoot that there had been one in her previous post?
Yeah, both of these developments were news to her. She said that she wasn't aware until the day before the story was published by us. So essentially, when we sent our questions to get their response, that's when she became aware. One big surprise. She had another big surprise later in the week. If we take her statement, of course, at face value, when she found out from us that Kim Fox had started an investigation on August 19th.
Lots going on
because she
there.
said she didn't know about that.
Lots going on there, and hopefully those lifeguards are safe and things are under control as these investigations get underway. More investigations, including of Jim Gardner, who apologized to the city council this week for profane and misogynistic text messages. He also, by the way, is facing a federal probe as well, and also ethics investigations. Taman, do you expect that there is going to be more fallout here as we have progressives calling for him to resign?
I think so. I think it's not going away. Obviously, with the FBI looking into this matter, and you had the city ethics board potentially finding him, but obviously the potential for this to perhaps be criminal charges or whatever may come out of the FBI investigation, that's very damning. So he did apologize at the city council meeting on Tuesday, reading a written statement, and you got the sense that some of his colleagues were just not satisfied with that. Sue Garza said that she wishes that he didn't read the statement like that. Rosanna Ramirez Sanchez, Rodriguez Sanchez certainly wants him censured and is trying to rally support around that. So, no, I don't think this is going away. Mayor Lightfoot said he ought to hold a news conference or make himself available to journalists to answer questions. That's certainly something he's going to have to do at some point. No, this is not done.
Because thus far he hasn't given answers to the media stand-ins for the public. AD, Alderwoman Rosanna Rodriguez Sanchez calling for censure by the city council. Have we seen something like that happen before? He, after all, is not the only member of the city council under investigation.
Right. Well, no, I haven't seen it in the time that I've been covering council. And we have to put this into context of 3 other aldermen being currently under indictment. It's a remarkable time in the Chicago City Council. We're seeing a lot of things that we haven't seen before. As folks get dethroned from positions of power, there's a lot of things that change, people trying new things. And I wouldn't expect that to let up, and I wouldn't expect the stories to keep coming out. 'Cause if you remember, Block Club and this group, People's Fabric, have been reporting on stuff about Jim Gardner way back to the election. And the more people feel comfortable coming out and feel like they have someone they can turn to give their story to, in this case, they have both the FBI and the IG, I think the more we're going to find out. And I'll be shocked if we hear from Jim Gardner himself, because I think all of us on this video call have tried to reach him for comment on all of these stories that are coming out.
Listeners as well, if anybody wants to share their stories. Just, Dan, briefly, can I have you weigh in? I mean, is part of this retaliation and then helping to give favors to friends just part of politics, or have we really seen a swing modern day that's just not tolerated?
Oh, no, I think when you're talking about the FBI, you're talking about things that have been against the law always. That doesn't mean it doesn't get broken frequently in the city council. As AD said, there are several aldermen right now who are under indictment. We've seen literally dozens of them over the last few decades get busted. But this is very much across the line if proven in many of these cases. And I think all of I lost count of how many different people are investigating Jim Gardner. But
I don't know if we have time for that, unfortunately. We're running out of time. I don't think we can.
Above all, it's the FBI and the U.S. Attorney. I mean, that's the whole ballgame right there.
AD, I want to go back to you briefly because you reported today that the Cook County assessor, property taxes getting higher, those bills are coming out, has a competitor. Real quick, who is Fritz Kagi looking at as a potential opponent?
Carrie Steele, she is the head of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Chicago, very popular government body. She's a chemist by training, but she has a lot of backing from South and West Side elected officials, and she'll kind of be coming out with her message on Monday of how Fritz Kagi hasn't gone far enough or acted quickly enough to reform the property tax system here. So I'll be looking out for what she says on Monday, which is also Chicago Budget Day. So it'll be another busy one.
Ooh, yeah, lots to, I don't know if look forward to is the appropriate phrase there, but a lot going on in the 30 seconds or so that we have left. Taman, let's toss it to you because action on the state level, sweeping energy law now in place. How big of a deal is this for Illinois?
Oh, it's huge. Obviously, the immediate impact is it saves two nuclear plants that Exelon wanted, but it moves the state to renewable energy. It sets deadlines and powers down some coal-burning plants, and that's the climate change agenda that Governor Pritzker had, and we can expect, he's already flooding our airways with commercials that soon we'll see about Illinois having one of the most progressive climate change legislation
More
in the
ads
country.
coming our way thanks to Governor Pritzker's monetary largesse, bragging about that. I'm afraid that though we have energy to talk more, we are out of time. So our very much thanks to Mila Kompolova of Chalkbeat Chicago, A.D. Quigg of Crane's Chicago Business, Taman Bradley of WGN-TV, and Dan Mihalopoulos of WBEZ. Thanks so much. That is our show for this Friday night. And now for the Week in Review. I'm Amanda Vinicky. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Office.